for one another is an act of human compassion and concern that each of us can fulfill every single day. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require anything special except the willingness to pour out our love one for another. Jesus said, "It is finished." What was finished? The work that God had sent him to do was finished with his death on the cross, but not the work that God has for us to do. A man had given his life to the ministry of the poor and disenfranchised in the slums of New York City. He was in poor health and often discouraged. He was asked by a friend, "Why don't you just run away from it all before you are broken by this inhuman burden that you have put upon yourself?" The man replied, "I would run away from it all, but a strange man on a cross won't let me." It is finished. What is finished? The work that God had sent him to do was finished with his death on the cross, but not the work that God has for us to do. We're not in the world for our own joy. We're not here for our own pleasure. We're not here for our own self-gratification. We're here because God placed us in this world to be instruments of God's purpose and will for this, the world that he created. It's a wonderful thing to know that we are right with God, that we are converted, or that we are born again. But after a while, such experiences become stale and unsatisfying unless we are practicing the good news of God and God's redeeming love in Jesus Christ by witnessing and by sharing our faith with others. Unless we are positively assisting the work of God's church, and unless we are definitively bringing to bear upon actual human situations the pattern of Christian living. In other words, unless we are acting out our beliefs day by day, unless we do what we say, unless we live as we believe, our proclamations become as noisy gongs and a clanging cymbal. What are some of the things we can do as individual Christians each day? We can visit the sick, the shut-ins, the homebound, and the lonely. Unless we have been sick or shut in or homebound, we have no idea how lonely life can be. We do not know how left out it can feel. We don't know how shut off from the rest of society we can become. What a wonderful and compassionate thing it is to say, we care. And we can do such a caring thing as delivering a meal to someone who might not have ever had it. A ministry that takes warm meals out into the community each day to share with needy people communicates love and concern along with the food itself. We can visit. We can be present for one another. And individuals can do this each week. We can teach children. We can nurture youth. Most of us can remember someone who taught us in Sunday school, or who shared their faith with us, or who helped us to grow as young Christians. Maybe it wasn't a parent, a grandparent, a Sunday school teacher, a youth worker, a counselor. Maybe it was someone who just lifted us up and helped us to understand the great truth of our faith. It's been said that the Christian church is always only one generation from extinction. Anytime one generation decides that its faith is not worth passing on to someone else, the Christian church is just that much closer to extinction. The only way we can continue to exist is as we share our faith with others. We have church buildings in which we worship because people shared their faith and believed in the church enough to build buildings where future generations might worship. We have a Bible to read because people hundreds of years ago believed enough in their faith to write that faith down, to transmit it, to share it, and to pass it from generation to generation. We can serve in the many and varied ministries of the church, all the way from our hometown to Haiti. We can serve because we care. We can serve in the various ministries that the church sponsors all across the city, our nation, and our world, because this is the work we have to do. Thomas à Kempis, a 5th century monk, wrote what has become a religious classic, The Imitation of Christ. One section in that book reads, "Jesus hath many lovers of his heavenly kingdom, but few bearers of his cross. Many he hath that are desirous of consolation, but few of tribulation. Many he findeth that share his table, but few his fasting. All desire to rejoice with him. Few are willing to endure anything for him. Many follow Jesus into the breaking of bread, but few to the drinking of the cup of his passion. Many reverence his miracles, few follow the shame of his cross." I knew a couple who decided to work in an inner city ministry. They were asked to teach one day, and as they were headed there, they knew they would be teaching the poor and the underprivileged and the disenfranchised. This couple agreed, thinking that they were offering a service, not realizing that they would be the most blessed. So one day, as they're heading toward the elevator, they run into an older man with a thoughtful look on his face. And they said to him, "Good morning, sir, how are you?" "Real fine," that man said, "except for one thing. Would you pray for me to have new socks? These ones are really itching me." And I said, "Sure, I can do that." And suddenly I thought, I have a whole drawer full of socks. I can take these socks off and give them to him. Reluctantly, he took those socks and exchanged them for the ones he was wearing. Asked how his feet felt, he said, "My feet feel just like they're in heaven." Now this man didn't think anything more of it until he went into the classroom. And that morning they were studying the 25th chapter of Matthew concerning the great judgment. And as they were discussing the section where the king was speaking to those at his right hand and assuring them of their place in the kingdom, because they had responded by giving food when he was hungry and drink when he was thirsty, this man was beginning to feel a little uneasy. Here he was trying to teach a lesson about caring for the needy to those who were obviously in great need. And yet, a man stood up and said, "I understand this." As the discussion progressed, they came to a section where the righteous asked the king when they saw him in such a situation. As they came to that verse where the question asked, "When did we see you naked and clothe you?" a member of that group suddenly stood up. He said, "I know this, because I saw myself this morning when the preacher," this man that was giving me this information, "sat down and took off his socks and gave them to this other man who needed them." Another member asked, "Did you really give him your socks?" He reached into an old duffel bag and showed him the pair of socks. Said, "I have plenty at home." Knowing that that poor fellow was probably offering me his only other pair of socks and I didn't want to take something that he needed more than I did, he still took it because he realized that it wasn't him who needed the socks, but it was the person who needed to give. And for that person now, those pair of socks from that man who had only one other to give, this is their most cherished possession. Just as you did it for one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it for me. Friends, our work is not finished. Amen.